One time I was teaching an MBA class, and I remember one of the students said, "Mr. Montanez, all my professors have degrees. Where did you get yours?" And remember, I'm from the hood, so I don't have a problem with confrontation, right? So I walked up to him and I just said, University of Cucamonga. No such cool, right? It's just my hometown. And he said, where's that at? And I said, private school, never mind, you couldn't get in. And then I walked away, and all the other students were like, ooh, you know how that goes, right? He says, okay, I'll give you that. But the truth is, all my professors have PhDs. And I had had it by this time. I turned around and said, look, I've got a PhD. I've been poor, hungry, and determined.
Hey everyone, this episode is brought to you by our sponsor, BetterHelp, an online counseling company with the mission to make professional counseling accessible, affordable, and convenient. I hope you enjoy. Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Impact Theory. I am here with somebody that I think is going to blow your mind, the one, the only, Richard Montanez. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. A pleasure to be here with you.
Dude, so good to have you. Your story is insane. Your new book, Flamin' Hot, it may be my all-time favorite success story. It is so amazing, the number of obstacles that you've had to overcome to get where you are today, and just the sheer breadth of your career is really awe-inspiring. And I would love to just start at the beginning, man. What's the background? Why is the book called Flamin' Hot? Like, walk us through that extraordinary narrative.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that you read it and you understood it, because people find out everything that I went through. The first thing they say is, why'd you stay there so long? It's hard to explain to people, that's what pioneers do. They map out new territories and they come back and they bring settlers. So that was one of the reasons I stayed, because I knew that I was a pioneer. I was doing something new that a lot of people didn't understand. And
just to give people a tiny bit of context so they understand what you mean by pioneer. So your family, 2 generations picking grapes. You guys are basically in a work camp, and whole family's picking grapes. You're sort of the first one that's going to have a career beyond that, go to PepsiCo, get a job as a janitor, and end up, just to give people like the punchline so they see how powerful this is, you end up as an executive. From janitor to exec, it's really a pretty radical story. So, all right. So now backing up to being a pioneer, when did you begin to see yourself as a pioneer? Was that right from the jump, or was that something that occurred later?
I right from the very beginning. Now, I didn't know what a pioneer was, but I look back on my childhood. Even as a child, I was a pioneer, because you're right. Where we grew up was a small town called Guasti, California. It was a farm migrant labor camp. Everybody picked grapes. About 2,000 families lived there. My grandpa, my dad, my mom, my aunts, everybody picked grapes. And we would pick grapes as a family for one reason, because we got paid by the box. So the more a family went, the more they made. It wasn't by the hour in those days. And so I wasn't picking full time. Maybe on the weekends, or maybe in the summer where there was no school or whatever. And it wasn't as bad as some of the other migrant communities, because the guy who built the city, Guasti, Segundo Guasti, he was an Italian that came from Italy. He migrated himself. So he built this, he built housing for us, he built a church, and he built a school. So it was bad at first, but then, as he was building it, it got a little better. And, that's where I started up. There was, 10 children. I'm the second oldest. So, we were really poor, but I tell people, it was a fun kind of poor.
What made it fun? I've heard you say that, and there's something super beautiful about why you say that it was fun. What made it fun?
Yeah, because the first thing is, there was a lot of children, and we had no toys, and we had no bikes. So I remember one time we found one of the plow tractors. They changed the tire and they threw the tires off. So we would get inside the tire and roll each other, like a Ferris wheel down the vineyard. So it was stuff like that. You had to make up your own imagination. We made our own, go-karts and things like that. And then the rooms were more like a motel. There was no kitchen, there was no bathroom, just for one room. And it was a community kitchen, like a big restaurant. There was big stoves and it was refrigerated. So every morning I had breakfast with, 8, 10, 12 families, and for dinner, it was the same thing. So it was the community is just like, I've since to seen that again, a community where everybody, one grandma here ran out of whatever eggs and the other grandma would be right here. You had your own refrigerator and you had your name on it, and nobody stole from each other. It was just like, everybody made sure everybody had enough to eat. So that's what I'm saying. It was just so fun. I didn't know I was poor. We just, there was an old reservoir tank that they would fill it up to watering the vineyards. And we used to go swimming in there, and the owner never said anything because, he knew he was like, these are my kids. So that's why my dad and my grandfather were very thankful, for the start that, that family gave us.
Yeah, that's one of the things about your story that I am so in love with is, the sort of classic American dream is that my kids will do better than we did. And when you first get the opportunity to go apply I think at the time it was just Frito-Lay. I don't know if it was owned by Pepsi at that time or not, but and you go and you get the job, and then they give you a pretty key piece of advice that ends up setting you up. When you got the job as the janitor, what did they tell you?
Well, that was an experience in itself. It was a dream come true because, after picking grapes, I worked at a car wash and I was a gardener. I was pretty much working full time when I was 10, 12 years old. I even had a fake birth certificate that my mom got me saying that I was 18 years old, so I could work at the car wash. And one day my neighbor said, hey, they're hiring at Frito-Lay. This is exactly what I thought. I said, oh my God, Frito-Lay. And it was owned by Pepsi. I thought, if I could get a job at Frito-Lay, I could change the legacy for the Montañez family. I can go from the fields into the factories. And people are like, it's a factory job. No, it's an opportunity to change my legacy. They have benefits. I went from $2 an hour to $4.50 an hour, double the pay with benefits. I could start my family. I was just so excited. And at the time I could barely read and write. It was true. I don't have any school, but yet, I need to remind people I didn't stay there. I educated myself. So anyways, my wife actually filled out the application for me, and I took it back the next day, and I was really nervous because the manager looked at the application and he looked at me kind of funny, like questioning me. He goes, "Did you fill this out?" And I scared. I said, "Yes." And he goes, "You have nice handwriting." I've been taking Judy's credit ever since. So I got the job. He says, "You're hired. You're the janitor. Can you start tonight?" I said, "Absolutely." So it's interesting that the plant, the Frito-Lay plant, was maybe about a quarter of a mile away from the labor camp. And in those days, Frito-Lay used to build plants out in nowhere, and that's where Guasti was. It's kind of like industrial built around it. It's not the same anymore. So I was able to, catch my grandfather and my dad, and my grandfather said something to me that I say is the reason I'm successful. And I love to tell young people this. We've spoken at Harvard, Notre Dame, some of the top schools in the country, and I always say this. And he asked me, "What are you going to do?" I said, "I'm the janitor. I have to mop the floors." And he looked at me and he said, "When you mop that floor, you make sure that it shines, so when people see it, they know that a Montanez mopped it." And my dad said, "Listen to your grandpa." I actually took that on. And this is what I tell people. And maybe some people will get it and some won't. I said, as much as I love the compensation, the promotions, Frito-Lay, Hot Cheetos, Pepsi, the truth is, it was never about them. It was always about my last name. It was always about that, and I'm mopping the best I could. And I saw that I was having an influence. And people say, how can you have an influence when you're just a janitor? And I told people, there's no such thing as just a janitor. When you believe in your heart, you're going to be the best. No such thing as a waiter, a bus driver. And what was happening was my job was to clean the bathrooms, the lunchroom, and all the managers' offices before they came in the morning. So the workers would go into the bathroom, and the bathroom was spotless. It smelled good, and they come out with a smile like, "Hey, who cleaned that?" And then they go into the lunchroom, and it was spotless. I wasn't complaining like throw your own trash. I was just cleaning and smelled good. And then in the morning, the managers were opening up their offices and saying, "Wow, my office is spotless. Who did this?" And everybody pointed to that janitor and said, Richard Montanez. And that's when I learned that at a very young age that I had an influence. I could influence people without saying one word by my work ethics. I put a smile on their face and never even said anything. And then I realized too, some of these quotes that are ancient, exactly that, they're ancient. Somebody said, you get promoted by who you know. I said, that's not true. You get promoted by who knows you. You can say you know the CEO or the manager all you want, but if they don't, and that's what was happening as a janitor. People were knowing who I was just because of my work ethics. I hadn't even spoken a word yet.
One of the coolest things about your story to me is that 2 weeks after you get the job, even though you're doing a good job, they go to fire you. And one, why did they go to fire you? And then how did you turn it around? Because this to me is where you go from like a cool story to like, whoa, this guy really has another gear.
That broke me. 2 weeks, my at the time manager called me up. The probation period was actually 30 days. And 15 days had gone by, and he said, I got to let you go. And I can't tell. I mean, I didn't even have a hard time talking about it because it was so long ago. But what it did to me, I was just totally devastated. Like, I blew the only shot that somebody like myself, because you have to understand, people say you don't make right choices when you're in the hood, or ain't too many good choices coming to the hood. I don't frown on anybody who's from that area because that's where I come from. I come from the ghetto. My leadership is from the hood. So I just thought, man, it ain't going to come again. And I blew it, So I begged him like, man, please, let me, what did I do? Then he said, well, you don't show any initiative. I didn't know what the word meant. And here's what he was saying is, he told me to mop this. And I did it so fast and so good that I was finishing too early. So I didn't know what to do. So guess what I did? Is I mopped it again. So I just kept cleaning the same stuff within those 8 hours, knowing that I'd done it in 4 hours. But listen to this, no one had ever done it in 4 hours. So he said, you show no initiative. And I didn't know what that meant. So I went and I begged him. I said, just give me 2 more weeks. I will be the most initiative person you ever see. Please, please. And it's part of my destiny. He said, okay, you got 2 weeks. So I went home, and Judy's been my teacher, my inspiration. I said, Judy, I almost got fired. And she said, what happened? And I said, he said I didn't have any initiative. And I said, what is that? And then she began to explain to me, and it hurt. I mean, it hurt inside, and it hurt so much that it took me over the edge. I ain't never going to hear that word again. No one ever going to say that Richard has no initiative. So
why didn't you quit? Why didn't you get angry and say, what does this guy know? Like so many people, their responses at that point, they're like, F this guy, I'm out of here.
Because I didn't have any other choices. I knew where I was at that time. I knew there was racial discrimination everywhere. Not to point any fingers, but that was the 70s. We just came out of the 60s. So I didn't have a whole lot of choices. I quit school. I didn't have a high school diploma. I just saw that, I'm a visionary. And the problem with being a visionary is we're 5 to 10 years ahead of everyone else. You got to have patience to let everybody else catch up. So I knew, I wasn't going to get mad. I was hurt and broken because it was the truth. It was the truth. I didn't have any initiative. And that's why I teach young people, sometimes when somebody tells you the truth, you've got to learn not to be offended and use that because it is the truth. Even there's a scripture in the Bible that Paul even wrote that I love. He said, am I your enemy because I tell you the truth? And today people can't take that. Well, I'm quitting. I'm getting the hell out of here. He can't talk to me like that. Sometimes I say, don't get abused, but hang in there, build something. And that's how I felt like I didn't have it. I wanted that job real bad. I wasn't going to quit just because, it was true. I didn't have any initiative. So he didn't lie to me. He wasn't picking on me. He's probably one of the best things that anybody could have ever said to me.
So how did you end up responding?
Well, I turned it around. I did my job in 4 hours, and I was on. There was a wall that separated production from the offices and the lunchroom. Because in production there was, quality control. You couldn't go in there unless you had hairnets and protective equipment. So what I did is I borrowed some protective equipment. And I went in there and I started hanging out with the operators, the people that were running the lines, and I started taking their trash outside. And then if they wanted, this is cool, this is the truth. I don't know, people will like it, but if they wanted a cigarette break, to go outside and smoke, this is the 70s, right? Everybody smokes. So I would say, well, just show me what to do. You'll just be gone for 5 minutes, and they're like, I don't know, Rich. Like, oh, come on, I'm a mechanic, I really am, and so they would teach me, how to watch the line, and they would go outside, and I'd do that for a couple of weeks. And so the other managers were telling my manager, like, hey, the guy on your crew that mops in the night, man, hey, I just want to thank you for letting him take my trash out. My guys helped him. And they were like, what? Who did that? And he was like, okay. He was like, no one had ever done that. You heard the old statement, that's not my job.
Oh,
well,
yes.
after he told me that, I never said that. I said, I'm employed here. That is my job. That is my job. And little by little, I learned how to run the Dorito lines. How to, and it is like being a pilot. It's not, people say you just make chips. Oh, no, man. It's like you got to go to pilot school to learn how to make Doritos and potato chips and Fritos. Believe me, it takes a couple years to be a master.
Like, it is just so extraordinary the way that you think, and the fact you had to go learn the word initiative, and then we're like, okay, cool, yeah, I got it, boom, and then I have the chills. It's such a cool story.
Yeah, well, that's how it happened. Is I learned all the equipment. Even I'm proud. Many years later, my CEO said, you're the only person in the company who can peel a potato, put it in a bag, load the truck, make a marketing strategy, and sell it in the store. No one else can do that. And that separated me as an executive because we knew what the front line was going through. We knew what downtime was. Like, hey, we got to get that going on. We knew what safety was. We knew all that stuff, and it gave me an advantage. So I learned all the equipment. And then one day, one of the operators didn't come in. So that meant that what they would do is they would double up the 2 shifts to cover the 1 shift for 4 hours. So that meant the guy on graveyard, because that was my shift, he was going to have to stay till 11 in the morning. And the guy on swing shift was going to have to come in 4 hours early and then do his 8 hours. So it was, 12 hour, 14-hour day. And this guy had been doing, the whole week, and he was kind of tired because this guy was off for a few days. And I remember I begged the supervisor. I said, let me have those 4 hours of overtime. Wow, that would be, we'd be going to Disneyland that weekend, And so I said, let me run that machine, And they're like, you're crazy. What's the matter? You're not an operator. No, Ruben's been showing me, when he goes down breaks, I'm giving him the break. And what? He goes, yeah. And at the time I was writing everything down. I did terrible in school, but being put in my realm.
You're dyslexic, right?
Yeah, right. But being in my realm, all that it made me as though I was brilliant. I could solve math problems by saying, well, we need 30,000 pounds of corn, 20,000 gallons of oil. I need, 6 people to pass. You know that, right? And I was able to calculate where it was very efficient, where we were making money. So I begged them to, let me do it. And sure enough, I did it. And by this time I had been tweaking stuff to, see how this out. And that day, the next day, the main boss of production said, who ran, line number 1 in Doritos? Because that 8 hours, you set a record for most pounds produced. And they told him, and said, what? A janitor? Said, use them anytime. I didn't have that official job, but I was, I was filling in for vacations. I was doing more of that than I was, mopping. They could get anybody to mop, and then I really started tweaking things and writing things down, because when I started there, they told you how to make a Dorito. Okay. And then I started saying, well, how do you make the best Dorito possible? So I was tweaking things and I was writing things. It's like a laboratory. I was writing things down like a pilot would. And I said, I presented it I took it home to Judy, and Judy wrote it up like a presentation, and I gave it to one of the supervisors. And he said, again, you did this? I said, yeah. And he shared it with the production manager, who shared it with the plant manager. And next thing you know, they're using those specs for the whole plant. And later on, it grew into the nation. But the only thing that I'd like to tell young people is make sure that you write your history down, because no one will recording it because of who it was coming from. Because I wasn't an engineer, I wasn't a PhD, research and development person. So a lot of that history was never celebrated the way it should have been. So I'm teaching young people. That's why I wrote the book. I wanted people to know the true story, how I overcame certain things, but not to make the same mistakes I made. Get yours. So that's why I said, young people say, well, I want a career just like yours, Mr. Montanez. I said, no, time out. I never had a career. I had a calling. The stuff that I went through, I don't want you to go through it, but, I'm telling people, them now, write down your history. Make sure, because the people say not too many people will understand this. We're always told that it's about the team. And yes, but sometimes it's about you. Don't pass the ball. Michael Jordan would never have been Michael Jordan if he would have continued to pass the ball. Kobe Bryant, my hero. I'm taking the shot. So I learned, what? The ball's in my court. I'm not going to pass it. I'm going to take the shot. So I tell young people, don't pass that ball. Take the shot. And then they say this too. I'm an old corporate guy, okay? I got years of, in the boardroom and all that. It's just, I'm looking back now and some things were incorrect. I'm trying to change the culture. I changed the culture in corporate America once. I'm trying to change it again. So I'm saying, there's an old quote. I don't know if it was Winston Churchill, somebody famous said, you'd be surprised at how much you can get done when no one gets the credit. And I'd quote that like, wow, that's so true. But then I said, you know what? That ain't true. Somebody's going to get the credit, and it's probably going to be your boss.
It's a really interesting concept though. So, and look, you leveraged it, and you're right to say, for people to be really shrewd about how they play the game. But the way that you played it is also quite brilliant, in the sense that what I'm always trying to convey to people is, if you're indispensable and somebody's stealing your ideas, they still know they're stealing your ideas. So you still have leverage. And right. The fact that you were able to keep climbing, obviously you learned how to use your leverage extraordinarily well. But I want to go back to this idea of, I didn't have a career, I had a calling. Talk to me about your PhD. Okay, well,
I actually, earned my PhD is one time I was teaching an MBA class at a real prestigious I can't give you the name because I don't think they want anybody to know that one of their teachers doesn't have a high school diploma. But we were teaching, and I remember one of the students said, because I always say, I don't care what room you're in, there's always somebody in that room going to try to steal your destiny. Your job is to be ready, not to allow it. So he said, Mr. Montanez, all my professors have degrees. Where did you get yours? And remember, I'm from the hood, so I don't have a problem with confrontation, right? So I walked up to him and I just said, University of Cucamonga. No such school, right? It's just my hometown. And he said, where's that at? And I said, private school, never mind, you couldn't get in. And then I walked away, and all the other students were like, ooh, you know how that goes, right? He says, okay, I'll give you that. But the truth is, all my professors have PhDs. And I had it by this time. I turned around and said, look, I've got a PhD. I've been poor, hungry, and determined, and that's how I earned my PhD off the streets, So, but then I realized, as things were happening in my career, as you said, I found a way. And here's how I did it. People say, I'm trying to influence. And I said, that's true. But I realized this, I made it specific. I'm not trying to influence everyone, only the right ones. Who are the right ones? Those who come into your life that can help you and you can help them. So I recognize that. I mean, this was before, Tony Robbins and all that. So I was just doing it because I knew that I had a calling. So I was leveraging some of the managers that I saw were different, were visionaries, to help me learn, the computer, to help me learn this. And they were so happy to be able to teach, because this is during when corporate America is in command and control. And what is a command and control? It's, well, exactly that. I command, I control. I didn't hire you to think. I hired you to do what I tell you to do. So these new generation of managers coming out of college in the 80s were a different breed. They wanted to teach. They weren't from the old school where it was to manage it. So when somebody like me would come up to a person, hey, can you teach me how to use the computer? They'd like, yeah, absolutely. So that's what I'm saying. I didn't have to influence everyone, only the right ones. And I concentrated on who were the right ones in my life. And the other thing that I never did, and I teach this, I never let anybody know what I was thinking. I was smiling all the time, even when I was upset, because they would hold it against you. So it's just like, never let them know what you're thinking. If they give you a dirty job, smile, whatever. And that's what I did, and it worked for me.
Hey everybody, it's time to talk about all of our favorite subjects, mental health. Is there something holding you back or preventing you from achieving your goals, or even just interfering with your happiness? Do any of you suffer from depression or anxiety? As a lot of you guys know, I've suffered from anxiety for years, and trying to tackle something like that on your own is not always the optimal strategy. But a lot of people are super nervous to try out therapy, or they don't really know where to start, or they're just plain embarrassed. But now there's a service called BetterHelp that makes therapy more accessible and affordable. BetterHelp is professional counseling done securely online using your computer, tablet, or mobile phone through video calls, phone calls, or text messaging with licensed therapists who are certified by their state's board to provide therapy and counseling. It is not self-help, and it's not a crisis line. It's an online service available worldwide, and it has a massive network of counselors who have a broad and diverse range of specialties. So you can get a counselor with the sort of expertise that might not even be available in your local area. BetterHelp assesses your needs and matches you with a licensed professional therapist within 24 hours. You can log into your account anytime to message your counselor. And BetterHelp also has groupinar sessions every week where members can learn in groups directly from licensed counselors on multiple topics like relationships and ways to overcome anxiety. Especially if the thought of seeking help makes you nervous or embarrassed, be sure to check out the over 60,000 positive reviews posted on the BetterHelp site, and that's BetterHelp, H-E-L-P. BetterHelp is committed to making it easy for you to access the therapeutic help you need, even if you have never gone to counseling before. It's free to switch therapists, it's more affordable than local therapy, and they even have financial aid available if you need it. BetterHelp wants you to start living a happier life today. Visit betterhelp.com/impact. And again, that's spelled better, HELP, and join over 500,000 people taking charge of their mental health with the help of an experienced professional. BetterHelp costs just $65 per week, and financial aid is available for those who qualify during the sign-up process. As an Impact Theory viewer, you can get 10% off your first month. So visit betterhelp.com/impact and get the help you need today. All right, guys, if you need this one, please give it a shot. Take care and be legendary.
Yeah, it is so amazing the way that you never let anybody slow you down, stop you, no matter what obstacle they put in your way. So this idea of command and control, you get this new CEO, he comes in, he plays a video for you guys, and he says, I want you all to act like owners. Now, it's a speech I've given myself a bazillion times. It's a speech I was once on the receiving end. And when I heard it, it changed everything for me. And I was always startled that it didn't seem to change anything for other people. What did you hear? And then what did you do? Because that moment really becomes sort of the pivotal moment in your trajectory.
Life changing. And again, it was a video because that was the communication. There was no email. It was either a fax or somebody sent out a video. But I say this too, and I need to say this, that, I'm a firm believer in revelations. And people say, what's a revelation? A revelation is something that was always there, but it's been revealed or unveiled to you. Revelations are always there. They're just been unveiled to you. So when Mr. Enrico came on and he said, hey, I want you to act like an owner, I got a revelation. And here's the beauty of revelations. What do? They lead to revolutions. One revelation will lead to a revolution. And that's exactly what happened. I got a revelation and led to a revolution in my life. And what was that? Act like an owner. Now, everyone in there didn't take it seriously. But again, I'm trying to tell them, did you just hear what he said? This is the CEO inviting us, So I looked at it like this. Well, when am I going to get an opportunity to act like a CEO? When am I going to, I'm a janitor with no education. During a time when we're trying to get diverse, it's just, my skin color just blows it away, tells you a mile away who I am. So when am I going to get another opportunity? So I tried to convince, and I gave up. And I tell people, sometimes you just got to let go and just break ranks. I've been breaking ranks my whole life, So I went home and I told Judy, hey, the CEO said, hey, the company's in trouble. We're losing market share, and he wants us all to act like an owner because he can't do it by himself. And she said, great, act like an owner. And I said, okay, but I didn't know what that meant, So right next to the plant was the sales office. I just randomly went up to a salesman and I said, hey, will you teach me your job? I said, I'll go with you. I'll load up the truck. I'll do the work. You don't have to pay me. I'll come on my day off. He looked at me like, man, you can come on your vacation, free labor. So he said, meet me at 5 o'clock in the morning. So my first day off came, and he taught me how to write up an order, and he taught me how to fill up the truck so that we could maximize the space. And then when we went to the stores, he taught me how to maximize the time in the store so we can get, you want to do as many stores as possible. Then about this third store, I was racking it, and I just took a glance, and there it was. What was it? It was a revelation. What's a revelation? Something that was always there, but been revealed, unveiled to you. I saw it, and I looked at him. He couldn't see it. You know why he couldn't see it? Because he was an expert. Been doing that job for 15 years. So I tell people, don't become such an expert that you can't see things anymore. The people that work for me, I said, don't bring me ideas everyone can see. Tap into the unseen, and together let's pull it out into the scene and make it a reality. So what did I see? I saw people buying spices. I saw people buying bags of chilies. And then I looked at our products, and remember, this is a long time ago. I can send you a picture. I have one of the original pictures. It was Lay's, Ruffles, Fritos. Lay's, Ruffles, Fritos. Everybody over there is buying chilies. And I look, we don't have any spices. That's a revelation. It was always there, but it was revealed to me. So I went home excited, and I told Judy. Judy's that road dog, that partner that she'll line up with me wherever we got to go. And I said, I got it. I said, she's a great cook. I said, we're going to put your salsa on a chip. And she said, great, let's do it. Which chip? And I go, I don't know. I really didn't know. So on Fridays, on the weekends, we would go shopping at the neighborhood grocery store. And we would go there because I didn't have a bank account. I didn't know how to write checks or anything like that. So he would cash our checks and let us buy groceries. That's why I love neighborhood stores, because that's, they helped each other, things like that. So, we'd buy, he knew us, and cash my check and buy our groceries. And Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, there was a young man, his wife, and 2 kids. He was a street food vendor, and he'd be selling elotes, corn on the cob. And for $1, he would put whatever you want: mayonnaise, butter, chili, lime, lemon, cheese, however he had everything. And he used to inspire me because I'd look at him and he'd be standing so proud. Nobody ever told him he was a street vendor. He acted as though he had a 5-star restaurant. He was a visionary. He was an entrepreneur. And that inspired me. I saw that, he'd be like, wow, check him out. He really thinks this is a business, and it was, So I grabbed 2, one for me and my oldest son, and, took a bite. And then I took a second bite. Revelation. What's that? Something that was always there. I looked at it, I go, oh my God, that looks like a Cheeto. And I said something that I believe every entrepreneur, leader, great inventor says at one time in their life, and that is, what if? What if I put chili on this Cheeto? What if I go to that meeting? What if I do try to launch off a new company? What if? So I went and told Judy, I said, I got it, Judy. We're going to put your salsa on Cheetos. And she's like, okay, go do it. Go to the plant and bring some Cheetos with no cheese, just plain. So I remember I got a trash bag and I filled it with Cheetos, and I put it over my shoulder and I walked out the plant. And people know me by now, and they're kind of like, Richard, you are so ghetto. And I tell people, you know what, I'm ghetto, but I am ghetto rich. So we get home, and after a few tries, we get it right. And she takes some to her work. She's working at Target warehouse at the time. And, by the way, the Target CEO, Brian Cornell, is a good friend of mine. Used to be part of the PepsiCo family, and just a wonderful leader. And so they liked it. And I took some to Frito. They liked it. So everybody was saying, tell Richard to call the CEO. So Judy said, you have to call the CEO. Now, remember, command and control. Vice presidents don't call the CEO. A president does. And at the time, we were in every country that the government would allow us. So there was a president of Frito-Lay in Russia, a president of Pepsi in China, Mexico, wherever, right? So, there might have been a couple hundred presidents. They would call the CEO, not a vice president. So, I went and I found the corporate directory, because there was no email. Every company had a little phone book. I'm sure they still have it. And I'd look, and you could find whoever you wanted anywhere. So, of course, first one was CEO. So I went into the office where all the secretaries were at, and I picked the main one, the head, and I said, can I use your phone? And she started yelling at me. She said, no, this is not for private use, because after all, what would the janitor be using it for, right? Company time, So I said, no, I'm going to call the CEO. Her attitude switched. And I found out later that she had an audience, because in her mind, I was going to get fired on the spot, and she never saw that.
That's terrible.
She's like, hey, look at Richard. He's calling the CEO. Oh my God, it's going to explode, and so I called him. I was really nervous, and his executive admin answered, and she was just that. She was an executive admin. She was a visionary. And the conversation went like this. I said, "Hi, I'm Richard Montanez. Can I talk to the CEO?" And she said, "Well, I don't recognize the name. What area do you run?" And I said, "I work in California." She said, "Oh, okay, you're the president of California?" I said, "No, I work in Southern California." She said, "Oh, okay, you're the vice president of Southern California?" I said, "No, I work in the plant." She said, "Oh, you're the vice president of operations?" "No, I really work inside. And she said, "Are you the director?" "No." "Are you the plant manager?" "No." "What are you?" And I said, "I'm the janitor." And I began to tell her, I saw this video and said, "Act like an owner." And I just like, well, she said, "Hang on, Richard." I love how she said that. "Hang on, Richard. Let me see if I can hunt him down." And this is where I say that you don't have to influence everyone, only the right ones. She was one of the right ones, because when Mr. Enrico got on the line, he was pumped up. I didn't do that. She did that. I'll always be thankful to Patty. She did that. Like, I don't know the conversation. She must have been saying, "You got this janitor on here with this idea. You need to pick this phone up. You said act like an owner, and guess what? You got an owner on it." Yeah, so it's like we found out later we needed each other. He needed me as much as I needed him. And so he got on the phone. He's pumped up, like, and then he says something that just shook my world. He said, "I'll be there in 2 weeks. I want to hear it." So I'm like, wow, hung up the phone and I'm floating. I did it. He's coming to see me. By this time, protocol goes into action, right? They call the president. The president calls the senior vice president, calls the area vice president, calls the director, calls the plant manager. Conversation was all the same. Who let the janitor call the CEO? Who's this Richard guy? So by the time the plant manager got it, he was on fire. Now, keep in mind, this is during a time when managers could cuss workers out. Okay, you can see that in the old movies and stuff like that. But that was the reality. You're not going to get away with it today. But in those days, it was normal. So he came and he cussed me out. He says, "Who do you think you are? You realize what you've done? Everybody's coming." He's all weird. He's telling me, "Now I got to paint the place because everybody's going to see it." And then he walks away and goes, "You're doing the presentation." And my heart sunk. I said, "I'm doing the presentation? I've never even done homework." So I go home, and again, Judy could see that I was disappointed. And she said, "What's the matter?" I said, "I'm going to get fired." And she said, "Why?" And I said, "Because you told me to call the CEO. Now I'm in trouble." Typical leadership of a woman, she says this: "Calm down. It's not that bad. We're going to go to the library and check out a book on marketing." There was no Google. We had to work. But I've always been amazed at the leadership of a woman because of my grandma, my mom, and my wife. That, I consider it to be the best. My leadership is because of the leadership of a woman. And Judy calmed me down when I was panicking, and she took me to the library, and we found a book, and we literally copied 3 paragraphs off something that just sounded good. I didn't know what tell the truth. Of course I know what marketing is. I don't think there's anybody better than me, but I didn't know what it was. I wrote it down. And I don't know if you can see this, but just for your own eyes, but I have some of the original bags that I created.
Wow. That's so cool. Did you make the logos yourself?
Yeah, I drew all these
That's so
logos.
Great. This is why your story is so nuts. Like the number of people that complain that they're not getting where they want to go in life, but you go get the unseasoned Cheeto, take it home, create your own seasoning, create your own bags, your own logos. When to try and get you fed to the wolves, they tell you have to do the presentation. You go get a book on marketing from the library and put together a marketing presentation. This is great. This is like in a one person's life, exactly what I want for everybody to figure out, that at the end of the day, boos don't block dunks. You said you love Kobe Bryant. That's his famous quote. I love that quote so much, that you can get so good at something that people can't stop you. And they try, but they ultimately can't.
Absolutely. So, these were the presentations that I used during it. And any 6th grader could have done them. So it's hard for an intellectual, executive to come down to sixth grade level. But a lot of times there's a lot of imagination at the sixth grade level, and the things that you could, if you could think like a child again without being afraid. But I didn't know any better. This is just what I was, I was just going to go for it. So we made 100 bags like this, and I went to the Goodwill and I bought me a suit. That day came, we put this on transparencies, put my tie on. We made 100 bags. I mean, you couldn't tell that it wasn't going to the market. That's how good it was. A little bit of an artist, not much, enough. And again, all the tricks that I used, was by watching people, the survival tactics that I was like, how did you do this, man? I was cutting pictures out and, like third grade all over again, and, but as an executive, as an adult. And what I used to do before this, when I'd get off work, I'd put on my old suit and I'd go into a makeshift office at home, and I would practice being an executive. And my wife would never say anything. She'd be like, "Yep, someday." And I have pictures. I'd literally be drawing things and writing strategy. And I couldn't even spell strategy, and writing it out. But here comes the day, and I'm walking out the door, and I've got to say this part because it's the leadership of a woman. There's three things that Judy did in my life, and these are three things that I speak all over the world that I will always concentrate on doing. These three. She inspired me, she encouraged me, she reminded me. The word inspires, it comes from the Greeks and simply means to breathe life into someone. To encourage someone comes from the Greeks. Also, it means to place courage in somebody's deepest being, that they stand up and they're never the same again. And the last thing she did was she reminded me. So she inspired me by saying, "I don't know anybody smarter than you." I'm like, "What? I don't know anybody smarter than you." Then she encouraged me and she said, "You're the most courageous person I know." And then she reminded me, she said, "Don't forget what your grandpa told you. Don't forget who you are." I walked out with the inspired, encouraged, and reminded, and I've used that with my teams, and I realized, man, when somebody's inspired, encouraged, and reminded of their value, they'll conquer the world. So I got to the plant, and sure enough, anybody who was anybody was there. You had to be there. It's like the president coming in, right? So everybody's got a senior vice president, chief marketing officer, chief financial. Everybody was there. Even executives from a 500-mile radius needed to be there. One of the biggest meetings of the year. And I walked in, and everybody's mad, and they're letting me know that they're mad. The thing was to let me produce my own presentation and hang myself, and stop what Mr. Enrique's trying to accomplish. But they're wondering, why did he bring us to a small little town in Guasti, California, to hear an uneducated Latino talk to me about marketing, talk to me about building new products, when I have 300 food scientists that work for me, So I had the stairs and, and that whole thing. And so I got up there nervous. And then it's the first time I ever did a presentation. I remember doing I don't know if you ever done transparency. If you're not an expert, they will make you look ridiculous. So I put it on there and it was upside down. Like, oh man, turn it around. It's still upside down. I finally got it. I was so happy. And I started doing the presentation and guess what? I had their attention. I even had one of the original elotes that I had bought the night before and kept it in a bag. And I said, this is I told him, this is a meal. I found a way to take this meal and turn it into a snack. Never been done before, and they were like, wow. So I had them just speaking from my heart, no big words or whatever. And then one of the marketing executives, the vice president, raised up his hand. And I intentionally, this is the truth, I intentionally turned around and looked the other way. Because I thought, Judy didn't get me ready for questions. She just said, do this, do that. And, he's like, well, I got a question. I said, oh, I'm sorry, sir. We don't have time for questions. And he said, it's just a simple, I didn't realize you don't say that to executives, right? I mean, that's you had never done that. So we don't have time for questions. Let's go home now, And he said, oh, it's just a simple one. So I just, I thought about it, and then I said, okay, sir. I said, I'm really nervous. He said, well, how much market share are we talking about? I almost fainted. The first thing I thought, market share, we haven't read that chapter yet. What the heck are you talking about? So there was a door that I thought, you know what? I'm just going to run out that door. After all, I shouldn't even be up here anyways. That's it. I'm done. I made a fool of myself, so my entire life. I'm going to continue to look ridiculous. I was really done. But then something happened that is inside of me that I tell young people, as scared as I was, there was something inside of me that was greater than the fear that was outside of me. So let's go to the 60s, to my childhood, because many times I say, sometimes in order to find your future, you got to revisit your past. Well, my English was really bad. So in those days, they brought in after-school reading programs. 2 traders, one trader for Spanish, next trader for English. So every Tuesday, listen to me, every Tuesday, I got into the line I was told to get into. It wasn't my choice. They said, that's your line. You belong in this line. Well, what do you think I did in the 3rd grade? Is I broke ranks. And I got in the English speaking line where everybody just so happened to be white. The 2 teachers were 2 beautiful blondes. And as dark as I am, I'm thinking, man, can they tell I'm not white? And my friends were over there saying, Ricardo, estás loco, you're in the wrong line. You're going to get in trouble. Come back. But there was something inside that trailer that I wanted. And I looked at my friends and I said this, they have cookies inside. I'm going to get us some cookies. So I got closer and closer and scared. Remember, I'm really scared. I'm not exaggerating. Those 2 white ladies greeted me and filled my pockets with cookies. Now, when people hear that story, they say, what's the moral of that story? There's 2 parts, and it goes along with the end of my story here, is there's a cookie that's been baked for everyone. Young people need to understand this. There's a cookie been baked for you. Your job is to get out of that line they told you to get into and get into the cookie line. The line is your choice. How dare we tell a young person, that's your line, that's your line. Get into the line. Get out of the poverty line, get into the prosperity line. Get out of the job line, get into the career line. Uneducated, educated. Every child should know it is their choice. No one should ever say. That's why I teach parents. Never let a test score determine which line your child should be in. Because I flunked every single test, but yet I came out here. So that's the first part. The last part is what I say, this is the antidote to fear. I know that you have it, and some people don't have it. When you get this, you'll never be afraid again. So what is the antidote to fear? Why did I break ranks as scared as I was? I was hungry. Hunger is the antidote to fear. When you're hungry to start a new business, fear will leave. When you're hungry to run for a political office, fear will leave. So back to that question, as scared as I was, how much market share? Scared as I was hungry. I was hungry for more in my life. I was hungry for something different. So I got a hold of myself. And I remember the racks, how big they were, and I got it. Market share. And most ridiculous thing you can imagine. I stuck my hands out to the sides of the racks and I said, this much market share. And I could hear the executive, kind of gasping, like, oh, did he just say market share? But my CEO was a visionary. And he stood up and he addressed his team and he said, ladies and gentlemen, do you realize that Richard just showed us how to go get that much market share? And there was a young man who later became the president of Pepsi. Good friend of mine, Al Carey. He was leading, he did the same thing. He told his sales team, you guys think we can go get that market share? Now, here's what I have to say, at the end of the story, that many times greatness will come in a ridiculous form. And if you're not willing to look ridiculous, you will never achieve your greatness. That ridiculous statement made me a legend in my company. As I got older, young executives, Mr. Montanez, will you tell me that story? It was a game changer. It was, so I realized I was not any longer going to be worried about looking ridiculous or worrying about if I said something right or if I spelled something right. I was just going to go with me. And two, there was a lot of adversity coming from everywhere because the uneducated janitor just introduced $1 billion, actually $2 billion a year product for pennies. And guess what? They were pennies out of his pocket. So that was very offensive to a lot of people. I was very offensive to a lot of people, even though I wasn't, doing anything wrong. It was just, I just offended you because you went to college and I got more done. So when I realized very few people, all the great ideas, I mean, I shook that company, all the great ideas, very few people ever said, that's a great idea. And I finally realized, this is what young people need to understand. It wasn't that it wasn't a great idea. The idea was great. The problem was where the idea was coming from. Because again, I was told, this is the line you're not an inventor. You're not a PhD. This is our line. And the PhDs would meet with me and say, you can't be doing it. We went to school for 10 years, but I was able to do it. So that's how I was able to overcome so much adversity. And two, I knew that I never wanted to be a victim. And I also had 3 boys at home. And I wanted my boys to know that Pops took care of business. I was there. If I was going to mentor anybody, it was going to be them. And I knew too that at some point we would be where we're at today. I knew that I would be writing books. I knew that there would be a movie about me. I knew that I would be influencing the world. I knew that. And some people say, calm down, you just created Hot Cheetos. But you got to put Hot Cheetos out of the way. It's opened up these doors. That's why young people need to understand. Fall in love with yourself. Because when you fall in love with yourself, there's a freedom to be yourself. As a kid, I hated myself. I hated living so poor. I hated my color. I hated my language. I hated my food because I wanted to fit in and be like everybody else. But I realized at a young age that none of us were ever created to fit in. We were all created to stand out. That's why I'm sure you went through a lot of it, man, because, you're a pretty brilliant guy and you probably didn't fit the mold. And, you probably have a lot of friends that just didn't fit the mold. And, but I think we're seeing that more and more. I have tattoos, and I was always told to hide my tattoos. And I was always told to I not once shave my mustache. I did it my way. But today you're seeing that becoming a form of art now. Everybody has a beard. Everybody has tattoos. Well, somebody had to pioneer all that stuff. It's got to be in somebody's history book. What's in my history book? I was the first vice president with tattoos. I was the first vice president with a big. I was the first vice president with hair slicked back. That was me.
I was just going to say that, you've done such an extraordinary job of walking people through your story, but, in an hour, there's so many other things, the fact that the food scientists tried to shut you down. So you get the yes from the CEO, but then the food scientists do everything they can to kill the project. And you had to fight through all of that. And honestly, I think one of my favorite things about your story, because courage is not the absence of fear, right? The famous
Absolutely.
quote, it's rising up in the face of fear. And the story of you flying on the corporate jet for the first time and sitting in the CEO seat, and, everybody has a chuckle about it. And then you're crying on the commercial flight home. Like, when am I going to stop embarrassing myself? And the fact that you had to struggle, the fact that you had this inner conviction to, even though you were sick and tired of embarrassing yourself, even though you still don't like to talk about where you dropped out of school, like that you still kept going. And, your work ethic, your refusal to be a victim, your willingness to just keep pushing, to break ranks, to get out of line, to just outperform people. That to me is what makes you so extraordinary.
Thank you. And again, it goes to what I said at the beginning. I realized that I had a calling, and I don't think we teach that enough to young entrepreneurs. Is this a career or is this a calling? Because I believe your calling will take you further than a career And so I teach that, figure it out. You'll do more in your calling, but there's more pain, but you'll have more strength and courage to endure. That's why I was able to, because people would tell me today, like, why did you do that? Why didn't you just sue? Why did everybody was hating on you? Because I knew that someday I was going to be right here. I knew that someday, guess what? Guess who's flying the plane? Yeah, it's him. I knew it would just like, and it, again, the visionary, it wasn't going to happen overnight. It's going to happen years and years and years down the road. But here we are. And now I'm in a position to give back. We have a nonprofit where we feed hundreds of thousands of people every year. We buy 50,000 pairs of new shoes and give them to kids. They can't afford them. And we don't collect a dime from anybody. It comes off of our dime. That's our way of giving back. I knew that someday I was going to be in that position. And so again, it's part of your legacy, as I said, my grandpa said, your legacy is in how much that thing shines. It's not about, and it's not about how smart you are. It's about how are you smart. There's a big difference. Some people are smart this way than other people, but yet the people that are giving the test, they're giving the test and define it on their smart. So people like me will be mislabeled because no, he didn't do the IQ test. High IQ just means you have a good memory. That's it. It doesn't mean you can get things done. So, I know so many people that, they're so smart at building cars, at putting stereos in. We don't give them enough credit. They have businesses, these entrepreneurs, they built America and they stimulate our economy. Small business does more to stimulate the economy than big business, and all these millions of little shops, the person, having a dress shop, a shoe shop, whatever they may be, we have to look at them like, how are they smart? Well, they're smart in this, and that's what an entrepreneur is. And those are the things that I learned as a young man, and now I carry them as an older man. I'm able to share that. I used to say that, I'm going to be a professor one day. I'm going to teach, and I don't have an official title anyway as a professor, but I knew I could if I wanted. But I'm having so much fun just speaking all over the world that.
It's so crazy to me. And I'm sure, look, the vast majority of people that you've taught drink in your knowledge and recognize it for the brilliant map to success that it is. But it does make me laugh and cry sort of at the same time that, somebody would worry about whether or not you actually have a PhD. It's like, I've done it. That to me is the hallmark of somebody who, has done what I think is important in life. And that's to take your potential and turn it into actual usable skill set, which you've clearly done an extraordinary job of. Richard, where can people find the book? Where can they keep up with you? You have so much to offer. How do people stay in connection with you?
Well, I mean, they can, I use social media, and I post some crazy stuff on Instagram. It's
what's your username?
Hot Cheetos RPM.
Nice.
Hot Cheetos RPM. And now RPM is my initials. That's Hot Cheetos RPM. And I'll show a lot of where I came from, because I'm speaking to everybody. I'm not speaking to a certain, group of people. I'm speaking to everybody. I'm trying to find ways to speak in your language, to educate you and to give you something that could help change your life.
A great place to end. Richard, thank you so much for your time and for sharing that absolutely extraordinary story. Guys, dive into his world. Read the book. The book is phenomenal. It's called Flaming Hot. Check him out on social. You won't regret it. And speaking of things that you won't regret, if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe. And until next time, my friends, be legendary. Take care.
There's this thing people think that like, I'll be happy when. Once I get like this big, amazing home, or once I get this car, or once I get this relationship or an amount of money, then I'll allow myself some happiness. The problem is the finish line always moves. You never arrive there, right?